You're my first guest in a while. We're live, everybody. Welcome in. It is Wednesday, 1:01 p.m. Central. I have Brandon from Car Questions Answered back on the channel, and very excited to talk to him and you all about the current state of the car market, all the things he's seeing as he's going out touring different places and different areas that he covers very closely. Brandon is an awesome resource if you're looking into the just the broader auto market and a bunch of different things related to that. And he's somebody that I really enjoy watching his content to get myself caught up in what he's seeing and like foot's on the ground. It's not just a media company you go to and they're like, hey, this is what we were paid to say. Brandon's actually out there doing the research. So thank you so much, Brandon. How you been, my friend?
Yeah, good. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not being paid by any OEM. So if any of them want to reach out, then I would be more than happy to lie for them. Just no, just kidding. So yeah, what we cover on our channel is basically I want to show people what's going on at the ground level. I'm a used car dealer. I go to used car dealer auctions, and a lot of the things that we see at these auctions are basically a foreshadowing of what's going to come to fruition in the used car market. A couple months ago, we started seeing repos really pop up, and now you're seeing the data. We started seeing the wholesale prices come down, and then you see it in the data. So we just try to stay ahead of the market and be able to give our viewers kind of an inside scope. Now, I am in a small portion of the country. I don't venture out to other states or anything like that. So you have to take the information I have with a grain of salt, but I'm not in any kind of weird location. So most of the stuff that I'm seeing at these auctions that I go to are a good way to really see the broader market just from the ground level.
Yeah, and the one thing you mentioned, which is fascinating, is you're seeing some of these broader data points first, boots on the ground, and then you have these lagging indicators, these data sets that start coming in a month or two later, sort of similar to the inflation numbers we get with the economy. Where they were saying, hey, it's transitory and all the prices were going crazy. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we got to raise rates. So your research is really cool because it's kind of getting ahead of what's going on. So maybe let's start there. So what's the broader trend you're seeing right now as you're sort of touring the different places you go?
So it's really a lot of the same as what we've been seeing over the last 2 months. It's just getting more in depth, that we're expanding upon it more. So we saw a downtrend in the wholesale data starting like 2-3 months ago. It's just continuing that downtrend. So what's happening right now as far as used car dealer side is that banks are tightening up. Lending is getting a lot harder for a lot of these consumers, and the loan to values that a lot of these banks were giving on these crazy prices last year, 2 years ago, it's not happening anymore. They're getting more towards the traditional type of lending standards as because they're trying to protect themselves. Another thing that we're seeing is a lot of loan loss provisions that are happening with these banks, just according to what they're trying to shore up for a lot of these repos, a lot of these all-loan delinquencies that are coming in. Now, as far as prices go, we're seeing a lot more repos, a lot more of these delinquencies come into the market, but we still have a massive, massive deficit of new car trade-ins. And how used car dealers, for the most part, get our used cars is from a new car dealer selling a car. And when they sell a car, they get a trade-in from the customer that they're selling the new car to. And then that trade-in will make its way to the used car dealer auctions where I buy it. And new car dealers, they're not selling very well right now. So there's this massive hole that's happening from the trade-in side where we're not seeing inventory coming to the used car, the auctions. And then you're getting a little rise in repos. I mean, you're seeing repo rates spike, but they were almost zero in the last 2 years, right? So now we're getting this huge spike from repos, but trade-ins make up, I mean, I don't know the actual number, but if I had to guess from what I see at the auctions that I go to, trade-ins are making 80 to 90% of the actual volume of the cars that someone like me buys. So even though you're having this bump from the 10 to 20% that would come to auction, you're still having this 80% pie that shrunk so much because these new car dealers they're not selling. And it's by design. These OEMs, they've said that they want to not play the volume game. They want to keep their margins higher. They want to keep their prices higher and sell fewer vehicles. They can cut some of their expenses and they can still pad their bottom line, but it's really they're suffering on the volume game right now, and that's where it hurts the used car market. That's where it hurts used car dealers, is because if that inventory is not coming into the system, it's going to continue to stubbornly keep prices high, even though the demand is very low still for used vehicles.
That's interesting. So thank you so much for walking us through that. What do you think is causing excuse me. So, what do you think is causing just the limited number of trade-ins coming in? Is it people are just buying additional cars, or are people just not buying nearly as many cars as they used to, and that's why you don't see as many trade-ins? Like, what do you
It's
think it
not
is?
even close how many cars are being purchased now versus what was being purchased like in 2019. So you see a lot of these new like Ford, GM. I'm pretty sure Farzad you covered their earnings, and
Sure.
their retail sales they're not good, but their fleet sales are being bolstered, right? So we're seeing that they're able to put up good numbers in the last couple quarters, but in the last quarter, their stock still sold off. Like GM and Ford both beat and raised, right? And stock market loves that. Absolutely loves it. Usually you get a 5-10% pop whenever that happens. But what happened? Both of them sold off, I think both like to the tune of like 5%. Because when they went into these earnings calls and they started talking, they talked about the headwinds. They talked about Ford having to cut Ford Lightning prices because they're just not selling them. Mach-E's, I mean, they're losing like what $66,000.
That's
And
correct.
the stock market hates all this, and they recognize that all these headwinds are coming in, and they're also able to turn in some sales because they're kind of, I don't know this to be true, but it looks like they're packing their dealers. And that's what it looks like to me when I'm going to these dealerships and I'm seeing it. And I almost wonder if they're doing that in anticipation of cutting some production because they have the negotiations coming up. And that's a big topic that not a ton of people are talking about. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. And if these OEMs are actually trying to play that a little bit because they want to cut production, but they haven't made even any announcements, any sizable announcements at least, to start cutting production, and they're going to have to. And these strikes might be a easy little way out for them.
That's interesting. Let me recap sort of what's going on. So we have way less sales happening now out of the dealers versus 2019, which means that in a typical scenario where a buyer goes to the dealership, they will trade in a car to buy that car. And so because they're not selling nearly as many, you're not, from your standpoint, based on the work you do, you're not seeing nearly as many trade-ins coming in, which is what you use. So that's a signal that says there's very low movement in the dealership network, at least selling cars. And then at the same time, when you're touring these dealerships, you're also seeing a glut of inventory piling up, and especially around pickup trucks, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so trucks are a big problem, especially for Ford. Ford, I know there's big stories around Ram, and I've already been to some Ram dealerships, and they're already cutting prices on trucks. But I think Ford's got a bigger problem than Ram does, honestly, because F-150. I mean, they're still selling trucks. Don't get me wrong; it's not that they can't sell them; it's just the price points are too high, and the amount of trucks that they're pumping into the system, the amount of sales is just not keeping up with it. So I get a lot of flack. I get a lot of comments saying, "Well, you're talking about Ford like they're not able to sell or whatever." And but they're putting over better numbers like quarter over quarter, right? But you have to think about inventory that's coming into the system. So if you look at a dealership that maybe a year and a half ago, they would have 20 trucks sitting on their lot, and they would sell 20 out of 20 a year and a half ago, right? But now you have 100 trucks sitting on that lot, but they're selling 24 trucks in that month. So yeah, they increased their sales by 20%, but they should be
Mm.
increasing their sales by 300%. And they should be hitting the cover off the ball right now because they actually have available inventory sitting on their lots, and they're not doing it.
And that's fascinating, right? Because that ties directly to GM and Ford. And this is, this is sort of us. If you're watching this and listening to this, this is Brandon and I trying to put the puzzle pieces together. We're not in any way saying this is absolutely definitive, right? This is just what we think is going on.
This is
That's
just what we're
correct.
seeing. This is what it
Yeah.
looks like when I'm going to these dealerships. I mean,
Yeah.
there's trucks everywhere.
Yeah. And so what's interesting there is trucks are the highest margin, highest revenue items for companies like Ford, GM, which is part of the reason why, if you look at their last couple quarter results, one of the reasons why they've been able to post such great results is because it's not the customer that buys the car, it's the dealer that buys the car. And so when Ford and GM record, as an example, record a sale, it's a sale to a dealer whose lots were empty and now they're super full. And so they would get to recognize those sales. But since you're not seeing any sort of movement from the dealer to the consumer because you're not getting those trade-ins you usually would, then that signifies that there's a slowdown in the dealership, which also explains why they're so full with trucks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like everything's kind of rhyming, it's all rhyming together.
Right. So as they're pushing these vehicles to these dealerships, if they're not going to catch up with sales, then they're just going to keep stacking it. And they're not to the point now where they're actually turning down allocations. They can't be far from it, though.
If you were to guess, just based on what you see in your area, how far away are we from something like that happening where dealers will go to and it kind of walk us through the process of what that's like. So as a dealer, what do you say? Are you like, hey, like, did you sign a contract to buy X amount of cars and now you're going to say no? How does that process work?
So I'm on the used car side. So I don't actually know all the back end that's going to go through a new dealership, but I have learned quite a bit just talking to Ray and Zach, because Ray, he worked for new car dealerships and he's talked to me about allocations and how they work. And
these are the guys from Car Edge, correct?
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So they actually have a rep that comes to them from the auto manufacturers or whatever, and they want to send them a certain amount of vehicles, and they have to get the good with the bad. So if we say back when like the Ford Lightnings were a hot topic and like they were actually able to sell them before everyone figured out how trash they are, like they had to take like Ford Escapes that may not have been selling great at that time to be able to get one or two of these Ford Lightnings. So when you're going into a lot of these allocations that a lot of these dealerships are getting, they're now having to take some less desirable vehicles. And now it's funny how it flipped, because what's able to sell now are the cheaper things like the Mavericks, and they're selling some Rangers. But now if they're going to be taking those, they have to take the Ford Lightnings that they can't sell also. So it's interesting how it's going to kind of flip now. But I would say towards the end of this year, if we don't get strikes from the unions, then I feel like those allocations are going to need to kind of be kicked down the road, because these dealerships are not going to have space for them. They're not going to be able to move them. And these big dealerships, they are also sitting on credit when they're getting this inventory. They don't just own it outright. So as these vehicles sit for a long time, they're actually paying some interest on it too. Now it's not as much as like a used car dealer would. They get premium interest rates whenever they're flooring these new vehicles. But it still costs money for them to sit there.
And those interest rates would be reflective of the higher rates that we've been getting this year. Is that a correct statement? So like around the 5% area?
It will be more. I don't know the percentages of what it's going to be different, because they're going to negotiate that with wherever they're getting their inventory to. But they'll get a premium rate compared to the market of whatever they're doing. But it would absolutely move up as like the 10-year note moves up, as the reserve rates move up.
That's interesting. And there's another piece that's going on too that's fascinating, that kind of ties this all together. If you can pull up the first article link I put in the private chat, Producer Wife. By the way, Producer Wife is back after a little bit of a hiatus. We haven't had these live streams in a minute, so it's good to have Producer Wife back. Go ahead and click on that link and show it to us, the headline. Wholesale used car prices dropped again, what that means for bargain shoppers. So can you help us understand why? So we're getting a situation where the GM and Ford and the other OEMs are posting great results because they're filling up the dealerships with inventory, but we're not seeing nearly as much movement from the dealership to the consumer because you're not seeing enough trade-ins. And now we're seeing prices coming down steadily since the beginning of the year. Can you help us understand if this is tied directly to maybe the glut of inventory, or in the used car side? Is there, because the way I'm thinking about it is, in the used car market, you're not going to have nearly as many cars because of what you described, but it seems like prices have been coming down. Does that just mean people are just not buying nearly as many cars as they used to, period?
Yeah, so there's absolutely not a glut of inventory. We're still way behind on inventory levels. What
Okay.
is
On the used car
pushing
side.
prices down is because
Yeah.
you were talking about wholesale prices
Yes, sir.
on that article. So what's pushing prices down right now is the lack of demand, because a lot of these used car dealers they've actually been able to buy. And you talk about glut in the system. There's not enough cars moving through the system to fill up these auctions, but a lot of these used car dealers that are keeping their prices stubbornly high, their lots are actually getting filled up. And you can probably, I mean, you're in Texas, you can probably drive down the street, go to the closest highway, wherever your used car dealer lane is or whatever. And you remember seeing a year and a half ago, all these used car dealers had no inventory, and now you can drive there and they're all full. So you're going to be able to see that all the way across the country. But the problem is you pulled up that article and it said wholesale prices are going down, but you're really not seeing it on the retail side yet, because prices have gone down, I think, 8-10%, somewhere around there in the last couple months on the wholesale side. But dealers still remember back February, March, when they're able to get X amount of dollars for these cars and they were paying this amount, but now they're paying this amount, but they still remember that time over there. They're like, oh, I can get that much for that car. So they're keeping their prices right here and trying to hit home runs on everything. But as the weeks go on, as the months go on, they're going to learn that they have to start lowering their prices, and it's going to happen slowly. It's not as slow as the housing market, but if you think something similar to the housing market, where you have a seller post their house for whatever amount, 550,000. Nobody bites on it. They get no views, whatever. And then they say, okay, well, let's drop it 525. But at that point, maybe the market has already dropped another 3 to 5%, and they're still a month behind. So they get no views, nothing at 525, and then say, okay, well, we have to drop it down to 500. And at that point, if the market's continuously going down, then they're behind it again. Used car dealers are doing the same thing right now. As the market is moving down, they're going to stay behind the market. So it's really going to be a point where they're going to have to be pinched before they actually start doing some of these fire sales. And when it comes up to 60-90 days, to a lot of these used car dealers are on floor plans, which is basically just their credit lines that they use, when they're actually going to have to start paying interest on a lot of this stale inventory, which is coming up pretty soon. Then that's when you're going to start seeing it happen in the retail side. And I feel like we're already starting to see that a little bit now, but you're not going to see that panic mode yet for another probably 2 months or so.
And so the signal for the panic mode would be a bunch of used car dealers dramatically lowering their price. Would that be a good way of finding that out?
Yeah, and if we see that, then that's going to correspond with them keeping inventory. Now, not all the dealers are going to have to do that. There's not all dealers use credit to buy their vehicles, but most do. If I had to put a percentage on it, I would guess probably 60-65%. And that might be low. They have to actually use credit to buy their inventory. But what happens, especially on the smaller used car side, is that once they get up to 60 days on sell inventory, once they get up to 90 days on sell inventory, there are a lot of these floor plan lines that you're actually required to pay like 50% of what you owe on the car. And these dealers, they didn't have this money to begin with. So what do they have to do? They have to either fire sale, they have to lower the prices, or what we're seeing starting to happen now is they start sending some of their cars to auction. We're starting to see a lot more independent dealers send cars to auction, and that's what I think is happening right now. Is a lot of them have to make some quick money because they have these payments that are due, and dealers are not good with money. So they are going to take losses when they dump these cars at auction, and then use that to keep their credit lines, because if they don't pay their credit lines, if they won't keep them current, then they don't have any available credit to actually buy cars. If they can't buy cars, they're not going to have any inventory. There's no point in them even staying in business. So their credit lines are the most important thing to their business. Most of the time you see a business, I know you own a business, cash flow is the most important thing, but this is their alternative for cash flow. It's their availability to actually be able to buy these cars.
That's super interesting. So when you go to these auctions, what's the general vibe from everybody there? I'm assuming you talk to all the other folks that are out there. What's the vibe? Like, what are people saying? What are people thinking?
They're sad, man. No, yeah. So it's weird because, I mean, you got, how do I put this nicely? The dealer community is typically an older older age group. So they've seen that, like most of them they saw 2008. But there are a lot of these dealers that have been recently created in the last 3 years because there was just money everywhere and you could buy anything. And I mean, they put everything on credit. It didn't matter because they'd be able to sell it. I'm talking to a lot of those guys that have got into the market in the last 3 years. And they're like, well, we're not selling anything. I'm up on my floor plan. This is the first time I've ever had to pay a fee on my flooring line because I've always been able to move the cars fast enough. So we're starting to see that. And it's not going to be long before a lot of, what's the Warren Buffett quote where when the tide goes out, we're going to be able to see who's swimming naked. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think it's coming.
So from your perspective, just generally speaking, it seems like if I sort of kind of try to interpret what you're saying is the pain that came from the higher interest rates and the slowing demand from the vehicle segment, it looks like, you tell me if I'm saying this correctly, it doesn't look like we've seen the worst of it yet. Is that an accurate way of saying it?
Yeah, I don't think we're anywhere close because we just went out of tax time. It's just been a few months ago, and that's the best selling time of the year for car dealers. So they were still able to hold on because times were getting bad. Like we saw a downtrend in wholesale data last winter. So it was starting to get bad then. And then we have the saving grace for dealers that came in the form of tax refund checks. And so they were able to sell a bunch of stale inventory, and then they all rushed to the auction. Prices jumped up again. You can see it on the Cox wholesale data. You can see exactly when tax time happens, and it happens every year just the same way. This is no different. And then now we're starting to see this inventory that they bought right after they sold everything because prices were at their absolute highest at that point. Now, if they still have any of that that inventory, they can't sell it right now. So they're either paying interest or they're having to dump it. And like I've even got a buddy that like he hit tax time and then he got inventory again and now he's out of business. So I haven't. Yeah, and I mean he might have had a foot out anyway. He was one of those swimming naked kind of people, but I see a lot of closures coming the way for dealers, and I'm even like what I pay attention to dealer lots when I'm driving on the road now, and I'm starting to see a lot of turnover at a lot of these car dealerships. So I think we're getting close to it.
Turnover meaning what in this case?
Like they're vacating lots, and then another dealer's coming in there. So that
Gotcha.
and I've already heard of quite a few dealers that have gone under.
Gotcha. Wow.
Not going under, got out of the business. There we go. Not going under.
And then and they got it somebody else in there. Okay.
Right.
How common is that? Before COVID, how common was that turnover thing?
No, it wasn't common. We're seeing more of it now.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you sort of tell this what you're seeing, because it really does seem like we've been in a situation for the last few years where we're selling less cars than really in a really long time. Then now we have dealerships that are filled with inventory. We have a used car market that's not moving, doesn't have as much demand as we were expecting. You have less inventory coming into the used car market because of less trade-ins at the dealership level, and now we have a union, the UAW, that's probably going to strike this September unless they come to some miraculous deal with the automakers, which is going to continue to throttle inventory again in the United States from a car perspective, and we're seeing prices coming down. So it's like the weird thing from my standpoint is like we have less inventory. It seems like we're going to have less inventory available if the strike happens, both in the new car market and the used car market versus historical levels, because car makers are not making as much stuff, and the prices are starting to come down. But I guess they're coming down from like a very big peak that was almost like unrealistic to keep higher, you know?
Right.
Do you have anything extra to throw in there?
So, I would want to talk about the unions just a little bit too,
Yeah, of
because
course.
I really think I don't think there's going to be an agreement. I really think that Ford and GM and Stellantis, they're going to want to be able to cut some production and do it in a way that they can blame something other than demand on it, because shareholders don't want to hear that. Okay, people don't want to buy our $90,000 trucks anymore. So I really think that the strike's probably going to happen. And really, too, because the unions are going to go into these negotiations, and for GM, Stellantis, they're going to be like, look, times are tough. We're seeing lack of demand. We're seeing that that our costs, we can't pay you more money because we're trying to cut costs right now. And the unions are going to come into it and be like, we just saw your earnings. They're great. I mean, you say that demand is high. You say that your margins are great. I mean, it's all roses, and but you're telling us times are tough, and so the OEMs, they're not going to really have a foot to be able to negotiate, because they're going to come in and say, oh, we're doing so bad, but their earnings say something completely different.
Yeah, I agree with you that there's it's almost like a blessing in disguise for these for these automakers for the strike to happen, because it really plays into their narrative. Go ahead and pull up this article, producer wife. So this is the latest news. UAW boss. So UAW stands for the United Auto Workers Union, which is the union that is basically in charge of all the factory staff for Stellantis, Chrysler, Ford, and GM. UAW boss throws wage hike offer by Jeep parent Stellantis in the trash as strike looms. Management's chosen to spit in our faces. So, of course, this is not the friendliest language when it comes to, coming together, but maybe there's a little bit of posturing there. But what's interesting about some of the demands, and this is what I read from before, and I'll try to I'll have a producer wife maybe find this on Google, is that it looks like they're asking for a 32-hour work week from a 40-hour work week, and they're asking for 40% higher wages, just based on where they are right now. Some of the basic stuff. Perfect. The union, among other demands, is asking for a 40% pay increase over the next 4 years, a reduction in working hours, and an end to a tiered pay system that compensates veteran employees significantly more than new hires. The union also wants workers at the automakers' EV plants, joint ventures with foreign companies that the big three claim are legally separate entities, to be covered by the new UAW contract. So, to me, it seems like you definitely want to start negotiations high. And I know there's these are kind of like politicians almost, where they're trying to make a public show to get something done, behind in the backroom, sort of, handshake type thing behind the public eye. But it still feels like it's setting up for a situation where the legacy automakers are going to be, at least GM and Ford and Stellantis, are going to be in a position to go into strike because of that increased inventory at dealer lots, Right. So if you were to give it like a percentage chance, do you think we definitely go into strike, or we don't? Like, how are you thinking about this?
I mean, if I had to put a percentage on it, I would be almost certain it's going to happen. So, I mean, I would put 80% plus. And
Damn.
that's just to save face a little bit, but I think it's almost 100%, honestly. I mean, they're asking for a lot. I mean, I want a 32-hour work week and 40% more money too.
Sign me up.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. So, I mean, they know that they're not going to get that, but they have to come. All right. I want to get off on a tangent on unions. If you feel like you have to be in a union and you feel like you have to be against your employer, go work somewhere else. My goodness, that seems like the worst environment in the world, where you have to feel like you have to battle with your employer for fair compensation. I'm off my soapbox. We can go car market again.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I can tell you where I stand with this. I mean, I'm happy to share my thoughts. I think unions have been useful in the history of labor to try and get, like, back in the day where it was just one big employer in your town, and that employer basically was the employer where you can make a living. They have every bit of leverage to treat you like crap because you can't go anywhere else. Right. And that's where collective bargaining helps, because you're like, well, we're not going to stand up. This is crazy. Like, we're going to stand up to you because this is insane. But now in 2023, where, let's say, most communities, you have diversity of employment, the union becomes a little bit more of a drag, because it's kind of like you're there to help the union make more money in a way, right? Instead of you saying, you know what, screw this company. This company's treating me like crap. I'm going to go somewhere else. And if enough people leave, the company goes out of business. And that's what's supposed to happen in a free market. So I don't have, and I know this is probably the case with you too, is like, I don't have anything inherently like bad against unions per se, but the way they're run in this day and age seems odd, especially in environment where Ford, GM, and Stellantis need to get ready for the next generation of vehicles, and in this case, EVs. And you can't really do that if people are, well, I don't want to work this many hours because I don't think I should because I've been here a while. I don't think that's right. But unless they do that, they're going to fail because they need to crank out as many EVs as possible. So that's my 2 cents on the union thing.
Yeah. So on that topic, I'm gonna switch topics again because I've been wanting to ask you this question anyway. So I did a video on Ford's earnings, right? And seeing that they're losing so much money on their EV product, why don't they use that money that they're and not go to market, perfect the technology, do everything that they want to do to get competitive with Tesla, to get the technology to be able to offer a product that's comparable to Tesla and at the same price point, instead of going to market with all these EVs that they're losing crazy money. Now, I know research and development costs crazy money, but why even try to push them out into the market and then go ahead and they had to know that we can't be competitive with Tesla, and we're not going to be close to the price point. We're not going to be close to their technology, but let's just throw these Fords out and hope our name just sticks on them. Why would they do that? Why not make the technology better and then come to market?
That's a great question. So it's complex because I do think in the case of Ford, I do think that they're trying their absolute hardest to do it. But I think what it highlights is that making a compelling EV that is best in class, has really good range, has a really good price point, has really good software, has great performance, it has no maintenance. To do that, it's extremely difficult and it requires a certain type of culture at the company for you to be able to make the product. So I view product as a reflection of culture. Anywhere, any type of product that you've had that's like blows your mind, like whatever you've owned in the history of whatever you've purchased. I bet you those things at that time when that product was built, the people that were making that were probably so proud to be there. They loved what they did. They were super innovative in how they made that product. And it's a reflection of the staff, right? And I'm not saying Ford is filled with a bunch of losers. All I'm saying is if you want to stand up to a product whose in this case, let's just use Tesla as an example, is so innovative and has such a unique culture that lends their product to be as good as they are, that's going to be almost impossible to achieve unless your company culture is basically the same. And in the case of Ford, GM, Stellantis, these are 80 to 100-year-old companies, some cases more, where these guys have been around for a really, really, really long time, and they have decades of culture that's, it's managerial hierarchy where you have to move up and you have to be there a certain time to get a bigger job and more pay. And those people maybe are not empowering the folks that are actually doing the work to make a better product. And then you have unions on top of that. So people are not really incentivized to work as hard as they can, stay as long as they can, maybe even work 100-hour weeks for 6 months straight, because the union is like, you can't do that because that's, you get in trouble if you do that. And then, so all these things kind of come together and they make it really difficult to create a product that's going to be better than your competition. In addition to the fact that Ford, they're really the only one that has separated out the business units between, the Model E, the Pro, and the legacy business. But even then, there's still a giant company that's overseeing EVs. It's not a EV automaker; it's a gas automaker that's also doing EVs. So, how much of the focus really is on the EVs from a total worker perspective? And are all your talented people working on EVs? Are the people that really want to be there in the EV segment working on EVs? Right. So there's a lot going on, and there's a great book called The Innovator's Dilemma that really outlines this sort of phenomena where you have a entrenched player that even though they can try as hard as they want to make something happen, it's impossible because they're just not fit to be able to do what the newcomer does from an innovation perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it nicely. They have to show their shareholders that they're moving forward, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
they do.
So my thing is about it when you look at all of these companies that are making these EVs, and I think like the Chevy Bolt is actually competitive on price, but if you're I mean, Tesla's number one, right? So if you're going to be competitive with Tesla right now, you either have to be better than Tesla. They're not going to do that because Tesla's been around doing this for a long time. Or two, you have to be cheaper than Tesla. And Ford's not doing either one. And it confuses me because they have to know how the market works. Why would they not put out a competitive price option to so people actually, I mean, if they came out with a 35, even like a $40,000 EV, then they would sell them. But they're
But they
not going to
can't.
sell it a Mach-E for $65,000.
They can't. That the problem is they can't.
Right.
That's the sad piece of it, is that even though Ford has a 4 million unit run rate per year for all the cars that they build, so between the Mustang, the F-150, the van, the Transit, the Mach-E, the Lightning on the electric side, right? Even though they have all this scale, the scale is for the gas cars, not for the electric cars. And what you need to be able to create say a $35,000 car that's profitable, you need a giant amount of scale from a factory perspective to build those EVs. And then you also need a supply chain. So all the way up to the raw materials where you can buy the lithium and the cobalt and the nickel and all these different chemicals at an affordable enough price so that when you're putting it in the car, you're actually making money on it. And you need a giant supply chain and giant scale to be able to make a profitable $35,000 car. So, and the sad truth is that they can't. And so if you take a GM example and you take the Bolt is 20, well, it was discontinued. Now it's not discontinued. And it had a recall for the battery a couple of years ago or a year ago. And that car sells about between $25,000 to $30,000 per car. But that thing is not making money. That thing is losing a lot of money. And the reason why GM built the Bolt in the first place was to try and fall into the EV, the MPG requirements in California. So it's a compliance car. So that's why they had to get it out. People seem to enjoy them, but it's a 100-mile range and you can't do fast charging on it. And it's super, super small and it's not making money. And so, they if they wanted to sit down and build a $35,000 EV, no one's stopping them. But then to make it actually compelling, you need the culture, and to make it profitable, you need the scale. And the theory that a lot of people have in the sort of on my side of the place where we're thinking about EVs is that legacy automakers are absolutely not well equipped to transition because of those things I just described.
So, and I mean, so that's my point, I think. And I mean, because they're smarter than me and you are, right? They knew this before they were doing all this. I mean, it blows my mind that they just want to go into just a cash burning endeavor when they could give it a few years. Like, I mean, their shareholders need to see them turn profit, especially as we're going into harder times. It's very curious to me that they would go down this route when they know that they're not going to be able to be better and they're not going to be able to be cheaper. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from, but I think it really highlights that it doesn't matter how smart you are if you don't have the foresight and you have ego, then you will make the wrong decisions. And that's, I think, where and if you reach a certain size without a certain type of culture, it's literally impossible. So like size and experience doesn't correlate to being ready for the next thing. And that's why innovation is so disruptive, is because when the new thing comes in, the existing player just, like, literally, it doesn't matter if they're filled with geniuses. If they're at a certain size and they have a little bit of ego, that's enough for the company to just not be able to do what they should be doing. And it's crazy. And I've seen this in business many times. I've had the a lot of the privilege to really work closely with executives in my previous life. And you can kind of see this as like there needs to be a certain type of culture to make it happen. And it doesn't exist at these companies yet. And we'll see if that changes. So so let me ask you this, because you went on a ride with Dr. Know-It-All in his Tesla. You've been exposed to electric vehicles a little bit more lately. Give me your general vibe. Like, what has your mindset shifted? Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I was never anti-EV. It just didn't seem like something that would fit mine and my wife's lifestyle, the amount that we drive, and not wanting to have to charge them. I also thought beforehand that it took a lot longer to charge them than it actually does. Now I know that, so that's opening the door a little bit more for me to get on board with it. I will say that I drove John's Model Y, and that's the most fun car I've ever been in. And
Well,
I touched the gas pedal and that thing took off. I had a hard time keeping it under like 80 miles an hour, and without even trying, it felt like. So so that was really cool. I mean, I've learned a lot of the features as far as like setting the interior temperature when you're not around the car. I mean, I'm not completely on board with the self-driving stuff. John wanted me to go in to make a left across a 4-lane intersection that was busy, and I was
you
not.
puckered up a little bit.
No, I was not in it. Well, he was just talking. It's like, okay, let's try this left turn right here, and I didn't realize what I was doing, so I just had it in full self-driving mode, and we pulled up to the intersection, and I looked both ways. No, we're not doing this, and I turned right. There was a lot of safety features going on. I didn't realize how bad I actually drove until Elon Musk yelled at me the whole time that I was driving when I go off the road, when I would when I would not go whenever the light turned green. So that stuff would get on my nerves while I was driving the car. But yeah, I have more of an open mind as far as driving one someday, just because it was so much fun. It was like a jet ski. It was all throttle.
Yeah.
The
Were you
braking,
surprised by
I didn't like. The braking I did not
the
like.
regenerative braking?
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one you got to get used to. It's one of those things where, so I mean, have you driven manual cars, stick cars in your past? Yeah. So it's very similar to a downshift. So, before I got an EV, I used to drive manuals all the time. And so like once I got my mindset to change, like, hey, when you're letting off the pedal, it's just pretend you're downshifting and you're just engine braking. And then once I got my brain to get used to it, the regen braking became super natural. So it just takes practice. It takes time.
Maybe that's I need to work it like as a clutch kind of instead of
exactly.
But I mean, every time I took my foot, it just made me kind of go forward in my seat a little bit, and I didn't like that, because anytime that it felt like the car was doing something that I wasn't ready for, that's when I didn't feel comfortable. So I'm sure driving it for a couple months or so and getting used to the things that the car is going to do, it would completely change me. But the thing about it is, someone who's going to go in to try to, no, it didn't. I will get it after the show. But if I messed me up, my
the regen braking.
Yeah. So I would need to have it for a couple months. But someone who is like me that might be on the fence about buying an EV, if they go to test drive it and aren't able to actually experience this for a given time or whatever, it might cause them to hesitate in actually buying one if they're thinking about that versus a car that they're comfortable with. Because I can tell you, I mean, I drove it for probably an hour and a half. There was, even towards the end, I was more comfortable, but there in no way I would say that I was actually comfortable driving the car, knowing what it was going to do when I was in it by the end of that. And I was driving for an hour and a half. So
that's super interesting. So that's really good information. So do you think it would help, say, the buyer, if the electric vehicle, maybe like on the screen, it gave you like a little bit of a demo on how it worked, and maybe you could turn it off so you can see, because you can turn off the regen. You can actually take it off and it will drive much more naturally. John was telling me.
He said he had his on like maybe a little bit too aggressive, and that maybe that's if I had it turned down a little bit, then it would be much different. But I think what would be helpful, especially someone coming into a test drive and be like, have you drove a Tesla before? No, I've never driven a Tesla or an EV. And you get like this checklist. Okay, this is what this car is going to do that you're not going to be anticipating it's going to do. And that's the kind of stuff, like, because John, I loved how John did it though, because he threw me in the driver's seat. He said, all right, take off. And I was like, okay, well, and he didn't even want to tell me how to start the car. Anything. He was like, okay, just see if you can intuitively figure it out. Like, he even wanted me to, this didn't make the video because it was boring, but try to find where I even plug in the charger. And it was like behind the tail light or whatever. And no clue. So I walked around the car for like 5 minutes before I even figured out how to try. And he had to show me that. I had no clue. So even getting in the car, doing all that kind of stuff, it's going to, there's a big barrier, but I feel like too, because Tesla couldn't keep up with the demand, if all these consumers knew the good things and the bad things about Teslas and were more comfortable with it, they probably couldn't produce enough vehicles. And it's probably by design that they're not doing this advertising, this education, because they can't go to their shareholders and say, oh, we got lines out the door, but we can't keep up with demand.
Yeah, I tend to agree that if they actually pulled a lever where they were advertising at the same level as Ford and GM, and they did exactly what you described. I mean, their demand and supply is married up. You know, they're going to do about 1.8 million cars this year, and they're starting to do some very minimal advertising. So it looks like they're doing some Google AdWords where, you know, people will search for something will come up, but it looks like it's very, very small. But if they actually said, "Yep, $500 million budget in marketing," I agree with you. I think the demand will be through the roof. So let me ask you this then. Cybertruck. What do you think about that truck now, after being in a Tesla? Has your mindset changed? Be honest.
It's still the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I need to see it. I need to see it in person, because I could see how it could maybe look like a tank and look cool, but then I see the triangle shape and I'm like, I can't get on board with it. It looks so ugly to me. I mean, it looks like a DeLorean that was put, and I like the look of a DeLorean, but it just doesn't work on the truck. I feel like, so I need to see one in person. Next time they're showing one, hopefully near me, then you have to come and we'll go do a video on it or whatever. But I want to see one in person. I also want to see the loads it can tow and how long the battery is going to last when you're towing. Because I mean, I guess most people that are buying trucks now, they're not using them to actually work. And I am aware that Tesla is not selling a working man's truck in the Cybertruck. I understand that, but the just in the back of my brain, if a vehicle has a bed, I want to put it to work. So I want to see what it's going to do.
Okay. Yeah. So the rumors, so that they still haven't released the pricing. They haven't released the specs, the final specs for the truck yet. But the rumor is somewhere between 350 to 500 miles of range, somewhere in there. It's going to be able to pull 14,000 pounds. And the price could start as low as like 55 to 60.
Do you know at max there? If it's 55 or 60, I think they'll crush it. I don't see any way they can get it to that price point though, right? Is that locked in?
So when they first unveiled the truck in 2019, the starting price was 39.
Yeah, but then prices doubled since then for a lot of these new vehicles. I know,
but it's come down. Yeah, I know. Like for example, the Model Y and the Model 3, like their fleet basically that they sell now. If you look at their pre-pandemic prices to the post-pandemic prices, it's basically the same now. So the thought process is the Cybertruck, what the theory is, and then pull up that one of the pictures there I posted in the private chat, producer wife, when you get a second. Let's see if we can convince Brandon to change his mind. The pricing is going to be lower than people think, and that's one of the comments that was made by one of the Tesla executives. There it is in a camel wrap. Okay. Ew. Show the other one. Gross. You're like my buddy Travis. Travis has a F-250. What do you think about that view? Just that little cut. What do you think?
I mean, I like the rim on it, but it's just I can't really see anything of it, so I have no opinion on that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll get one in person. When I get mine, I'll drive it up to where you're at, and then we'll do a whole series of videos.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you were talking about towing capacity. At maximum capacity, what kind of range will it have at maximum capacity?
250 is a rumor.
Okay.
250. So what does that sound like? So when I say that,
that sounds great. Because what's the competitor? The competitor is the Lightning. And when you put that under load, I've seen videos where they're only getting like 40 miles or something like that. So
yeah, 100, something like that.
So that's that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and it might be a situation too where this is where the Tesla variable is interesting. They might have like a trailer or something that has a battery in it, that hooks up to the car, or it has a battery in the trailer and it's self-powered.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
You know,
Yep. So then you
because
basically
there
negate the tow load.
exactly. There's this
Yeah.
one. There's this thing called the light ship. I'll show you a link of this here. Let's see if I can find it. See if you can find a link for that, producer wife, and pull it up. So the light ship is a RV that you can hook up to the, like one of like the RVs that you pull, like the camper styles is like pretty big. You can pull it into any truck, and then that RV thing has its own battery, and it basically replaces that thing right there, and it's like it expands up. We saw one at the in California a couple of weeks ago, so it becomes this big thing, but that comes with a battery. So when you're pulling the thing, like that's what it looks like right there. So when you're pulling it, it's a self power. So your truck basically gets the range it would get. Uh, it will usually get, and it has solar panels on the top, so then you can charge the RV thing. But it's expensive. I mean, this thing starts at like
Right.
100,000. So
Yeah, but if they
super
can do
expensive.
that on an RV, I mean the frame for that RV is going to be very similar to the frame for just your like a single flat or like a double flat trailer, and they're
Yeah,
going to be able to do the same kind of build out on that without making the the living space on it. So they can get that price point way down even now, even though the technology is new, because they're not going
yeah.
to have to do all that living area if they're going to make it like a horse trailer or just any kind of cargo trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what they're working on. So maybe they'll come out with a trailer that will negate some of that range impact. But you're thinking like if it starts somewhere between 55 to 60, pulls 14,000 pounds, and with at full load, 250 miles of range, do you see that as being a good, and a 6-foot bed? Do you think that's a good work truck right there?
If they can get it to that price point, now the you're not going to pull a crazy amount of like the Ford diehards, the GM diehards, because they're not going to buy an EV. It doesn't matter what they're just not going to buy an EV. But you're going to have those people that are on the fence that are wanting to buy a truck, and they can look at that they're not closed down to EVs. If they're looking at an F-150 that's going to be $80,000, and then they're looking at this Cybertruck and it's $65,000, then yeah, I mean, money is the amount they're going to have to pay for it. That's going to help pull a lot of gas customers to EVs just by price point. And two, Ford Lightning is still, I mean, if they're trying to get $90,000, they might as well shut down the Ford Lightning because they won't sell
Yeah.
any of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what do you think about the gas cost savings? Do you think it's a big variable for people too? Because I'm assuming these F-150s probably cost a lot to run.
I don't think they'll care about that.
Okay.
Yeah, people who are driving big trucks, they don't.
Yeah.
That's not gonna be a thing. I don't think.
Okay. Got it. Oh wait, there's a lot. Producer wife wants to pull up a picture. I was in one of these light ships at the thing. Look at me. All right, good enough. Terrible angle.
Yeah, you look very upset.
It's like, what the hell? Let me ask you one more question on the EV front, and then we'll take some questions for the crowd. How's that sound? You good on time? Yeah, perfect.
You got me as
All
long
right,
as you want me.
dude. I really appreciate you, man. In the comment section below, and then producer wife will ping this too. If you do want to ask a question to Brandon or me or both of us, whatever, post a comment in the comment section below with question right before your question, and then producer wife will bring up only the best ones, which will be all of them, potentially. We'll see how much time we have left. And so let me ask you on the broader car market and how an EV sort of can play in here. So the last hour or so we've been talking, it sounds like, to kind of give a summary of people that may have just joined, the car market is in a situation where you have the new car dealers are being filled up with a lot of inventory, especially around trucks and expensive vehicles. You have legacy automakers that are not making as many cars as they used to previous to COVID. And they've been basically almost stuffing these dealers with a lot of inventory, and they're reporting good earnings. But what you're seeing from your end is that these new dealers, based on how many trade-ins they get that they put up in auction, they're significantly lower than they used to be, which means that there's a slowdown at the new car dealership. And on the used car, you're also seeing lower demand because of the pricing that's at the used car level, plus higher interest rates, and it's just a general affordability, and the ability for people to purchase a car is less because of higher interest rates. And then you also have a UAW union that is in charge of the labor and for Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which are the big three automakers in the U.S. They're potentially going in strike in September, which could additionally lower the amount of inventory in the car market, which is going to create God knows what kind of things. And one of the things we've been talking about is sort of affordability, and the fact that it's tough to find a affordable car that's good lately. Everything's super high priced, and there's not a lot of inventory at the lower end. So, well, let me first confirm that. Would you say that there's not a lot of good cars that are affordable right now? Is that a fair
Oh,
statement?
that's absolutely. So prices are still elevated by, I mean, they've come down maybe 5-10%, but we were 40, I think 43% over where they were. Like they rose 43% in a year. So we got a long way to go if we're going to get back to norms. And unfortunately, because there's so much inventory pulled out of the system over the last 3 years, I don't think we'll ever get back to normal what we've seen before the bad times, right? Um that's that's never we're going to have some massive crisis. We're going to have some massive crash both on real estate, both in the stock market, for car prices to have to get down to where people are just like, you know what, we're going to wait until they get down to this level before we can buy them. Oh, my dog's crying. Yeah, talk for a second.
It's all good.
My wife locked her in here.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So the interesting thing here is that I've been covering the auto market as there he is. He's back. That was quick. So one of the things I've been covering is the lack of affordable, compelling vehicles in the car market, and that's been a trend since COVID. There's very few affordable, compelling vehicles. Period. And so one of my theories is that once Tesla unveils their $25,000 or $30,000 EV, the compact EV,
They'll
that's
crush the
much
market.
rumored,
They'll crush it. They'll crush it.
they'll crush it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's done.
No questions asked.
No questions. It's done.
Okay. Why?
Because I mean the cheapest we're going to do a video on this soon where we're going to go to a lot of different automakers and find their cheapest offerings. So we went to Stellantis, and when we're at these Jeep dealers, when we're at these Ford dealers, we're at these Jeep dealers, me and my wife are very curious to know what just the cheapest thing they have to offer. And when we went to a Jeep dealer, the cheapest thing they had was, I think, $40,000. When you go to Ford, the cheapest thing that they had on the lot was an Escape, and it was also $40,000. So if you're having Tesla come in and have a $30,000 product, a $25,000 product, I mean, and these bigger OEMs, they're getting away from like just the 4-door sedan, the average vehicle that families want to have that are on a budget. And if you get an EV in that range where they can actually afford it again and they can have a monthly payment, I don't like payments. I don't like people to go into debt, but obviously that's how most people buy cars. But if you can get them in that range where they can have a car payment back again to where it's like $450 a month, they're going to be all over it. There's going to be lines out the door to try to get that Tesla.
Gotcha. And do you think that the traditional buyer that's more hesitant to buy an EV, do you think that price point would be enough for them to perk up and be like, oh, maybe I do want an EV now because it's affordable? Do you think that's going to be like a thing that will happen potentially?
Yeah. And there's going to be buyers that are like, you know what? I didn't want an EV. I don't want an EV, but this is the only thing. I want a new car. I don't have to deal with maintenance. And this is the only thing I can afford. And they're probably going to get into it, and they're going to have the realization that I did when I drove it. Oh, maybe this isn't so bad. This is fun to drive. And then they're going to now become lifetime EV consumers is probably what's going to happen if Tesla can get to that price point, and if the rest of the market is not also trying to push that price point. If you have the rest of the market where Ford, GM, Stellantis, they're all having these vehicles where the cheapest thing that they can offer is $45,000, and then they don't push prices down like Tesla does, then they're going to rule the market.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming at as well. Is I really do think there is a giant gap. There's such a huge gap in a compelling, affordable vehicles. And if any automaker can come out with a compelling car between 25 to 30, like a Corolla that's actually fun to drive and it's actually awesome, I feel like that kind of car would do so freaking well in this market. It would be insane.
Yeah, I mean, if Toyota got back to where they could have their Corollas for like around $25,000, they would rule the market. It's all
How much
about
is a Corolla now?
and what I usually see them for is like 30 to 33 grand.
What?
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen some Camrys around that range too, but the problem is, so they might have an MSRP of less than that, but because Toyota is so behind on production, whatever you want to say, why they're behind on production, they don't seem to be behind anywhere else in the world. But in the US, they're behind on production. Take that for with whatever you want to take it with. But they're so when you get to these Toyota dealers, they don't have any inventory. So if you want to get something at MSRP, you have to wait in some cases 6 to 8 months to get these vehicles because the wait list is so long. But if there's a Corolla that's sitting on the lot, there's a reason why it's sitting on the lot. It's because they've added a $10,000 market adjustment. They've added a $5,000 market adjustment, and you're not going to be able to get that thing at MSRP. You're going to have to pay these extra dealer fees because they were able to find one of these cars and nobody's buying it because they're so overpriced comparatively to the market, and they'll sell that car with a market adjustment because somebody's going to want that car and not want to wait. So because consumers continue to do this kind of thing, especially with Toyota, especially with Honda, that's why you're seeing them able to do it.
Mm. So my fear there is if we get into a situation where the consumer actually isn't willing to pay those prices, I feel like we might get a very severe shock in the auto market where just literally just nobody will be able to sell cars because we don't have enough affordable cars out there. And people are like, I'm done buying the $33,000 Corolla, the $50,000, I don't know, souped up Camry or whatever, the $80,000 F-150. I don't know. Like, what else would there be for people to buy? Doesn't seem like there would be
So
anything.
what I really want to happen, we just need one of these truck manufacturers to just start a price war. All it would take is one of them and say, look, we know these last 3 years have been tough. Look, all our trucks are overpriced. So what we're going to do is we're going to knock $15,000 off of them because we need to move them, and put out that ad, and the rest of them would have to follow suit because you're going to push so many of these truck buyers into just one brand, and they're going to actually be selling trucks, and then the other brands are going to suffer. But I would assume, especially because they're going into these negotiations together too, they probably all talk about prices. All their prices move in the same way for the most part. I mean, they're competitors, but they're kind of on the same team when you think about some aspects of the car market. So, so that's the kind of thing. But the way that the car market works is so stupid because it doesn't matter really what these OEMs want to do, because the dealerships can sell these vehicles for whatever they want to sell them for. So we get this example, and we've been to a Ford dealership lately. So you know that Ford dropped their Lightning prices,
Yes, sir.
and they dropped them up to 17%. We went and saw a Ford Lightning last week, and it still had the MSRP of like $85,000, $90,000, whatever it was, and the dealer was still adding on a $10,000 dealer adjustment on top of it. So Ford is saying, hey, we can't sell these Lightnings, and we're lowering the price by 17%. And this dealer says, you know what? It doesn't matter. We're keeping the regular MSRP on it, and then we're adding $10,000 on top of that.
Wow.
So it doesn't.
Why?
I mean, they're stuck in their ways, and a lot of these like sales managers and stuff, I mean, this is not their money. This is they're owned by massive deep pocket things. So they're not going to be in a position where they get pinched. What's going to pinch them is when they start having to stop getting their allocations, and that's the point when you're going to start seeing them start to cut prices. We went to a Jeep dealership just 2 days ago, and finally, this Jeep dealer stacked up. It's actually a video I've got coming out today, and they had prices reduced $3,000 across like all their Compass, all their Renegades, whatever the small the small little 4-door Jeeps are they're cheaper models, and they had it went from $41,000 down to $38,000 is what the sticker they had in the window. But if you go to their addendums on the side, they were adding $3,100 worth of add-ons. So they were taking $3,000 off and then adding $3,000 right back. It's so ridiculous. And it's going to come down to, okay, the OEMs are going to say, look, we're not selling trucks, guys. We gotta bring the prices down. But after they do that, they're going to add incentives. So you'll be able to get money off. They're already adding incentives right now. So when you're going and you're a buyer of a new vehicle, you can get percentages off that they're actually sending from Ford, from Stellantis, from GM. But the dealers can still add on whatever they want to add on. And if you want to buy at that dealership, you have to pay, or you have to go somewhere else and buy another vehicle. So OEMs have to lower prices first, and then dealers have to do it. But both
crazy. Man. And so the red flag that's going off, like the alarms that are going off for me is okay, if you have a player in the marketplace that doesn't have a dealership network that can lower prices whenever they want, and they can offer, say, that truck for 55, 60 and that compact car for 25, 30, and that's going up against a dealership network that can do whatever they want from a pricing perspective, and they're often over leveraged, that feels like disaster in the making to me.
Yeah, and we've been through this before, and taxpayers bailed them out. So we'll see what happens this time.
Shout out 2008.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is a good time to start a Q&A. You good with some questions, Brandon?
Yeah, let's go.
Perfect. All right, let's bring up the first one. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're almost at 1,820 viewers. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is awesome.
Wow. What
Super
do you?
awesome
is that what you typically get? That's a lot. That's good.
Yeah, I get somewhere between, depending on the topic, between like 500 to 2,000. It just depends on where we are. You're pretty good, and I haven't done a live stream in a while, so it's awesome. This is pretty good. Even if there's one person, I'm happy. I don't care how many people are here.
All right, awesome. And if you haven't already, make sure that you're subscribed to Farzad's channel and put in the comments from this video what he needs to do to get you subscribed, because he will do it. There you go.
I'll just say thank you, and that's I'm just going to commit to thank you.
Yeah.
And then go make sure you go subscribe to Brandon. Car Questions Answered. He's just such a wealth of information when it comes to the car market, and it's truly a joy talking with you. I almost feel like we should do these touch bases like once a month or something, or once a quarter or something.
This is the most fun thing that I do. I love doing these live streams and the collabs. Like when I go on Ray and Zach's channel, if I go on to John's channel, this is most fun. As often as you want me on here, as long as my schedule allows it, I'm here.
Dude, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. I'll definitely take you up on that offer for sure. All right, let's bring up the first question. And Value Analyst. Oh, Value Analyst. Yaman from X. A question: what does Brandon think about used Model 3 prices declining below $25,000 and now qualifying for the $4,000 used EV tax credit? How does that impact used Camry and Accord demand? How do you think about this equation?
So you're going to get, when you're looking at how Tesla affects the rest of the car market, whether you're talking about new, whether you're talking about used, so you still have this segment of people, and it's a majority of people that are just not going to buy EV. So even when you get this price point down with these Teslas, it's really, I feel like, not instantly going to ever change the market for ICE vehicles, because there's just so many people that just feel like, okay, I don't live near a charger. I don't live near a place where I just see a lot of EVs. Maybe like me, I'm not comfortable with exactly everything that happens in this EV when I'm driving it. If they would go to test drive it, they'll be like, no, the robots are taking over. I'm out. No. And you're going to have, tons of, I didn't even see your shirt. Yeah. You're going to have tons of people. So short term, nothing. Long term, if you can get to like what me and Farzad were talking earlier about, if you can get to where the prices on these EVs continually push down to where they're just so much more affordable than the gas equivalent, then that's when you start disrupting the market. That's when you start turning unbelievers into believers, because people will, I mean, this is a stupid analogy, but generic cereal does not taste the same as the name brand cereal, right? But people are going to buy it because it's just cheaper. So even though they might not want to get into this EV if it's $15,000 cheaper. They're like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And then at that point, maybe they won't buy it, but maybe they'll actually do some research and find out about EVs. And then that's the point where you'll start selling them, when they start educating themselves, because it's so much cheaper than the gas equivalent.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. That's great insight. And I thought that cereal analogy was actually perfect. That's actually perfect, because I'm the generic buyer when it comes to cereal. So
I'm pretty frugal, and we don't spend a whole lot of money, but we're gonna get the name brand cereal and the name brand
you splurging.
A1. I gotta have it. It's a placebo effect, because I know that, okay, this is not the same quality, so it does not taste as good. It might taste the exact same, but it's just my brain won't work like that.
Fair enough. I think that's super valid. Let's bring up the next question. Thank you, Yama, for the question. Neil, question: on what basis does Brandon think the Cybertruck is not a work truck?
I mean,
it's ugly.
Well, no, it's ugly, but that has nothing to do with it. So my thing is, okay, if you've got to go to work and you're putting in all day worth of work, a lot of times you're going to be driving more than 250, 300 miles, especially if you're transporting things in this trailer. So now if you're talking about what we were talking about earlier, they make the technology where the trailer is not pulling down the actual capacity of the distance that it can have, then we can have a different discussion. But if you're only having a truck that can tow at full capacity for 250 miles, for a lot of workers that are actually transporting stuff, I think about me whenever we used to actually transport our own vehicles. So we had a single flat, and we would put a car on it, and we would have to transport that car. We would go to an auction in the morning. So we would travel 75 miles, go buy cars at auction. We would transport that car back to our lot, and then we immediately had to go to the next auction. So we're doing all this in a day. We don't have time to sit around and wait because we're on a crunch anyway. So when I think of work truck, I think of something that's okay, it's going to take me 6-7 minutes to fill up halfway through, if I have to fill up at all, because the range on my truck is going to be 450, 500 miles, maybe, depending on, if you're looking at diesel, if you're looking at a big F-350, if you're looking at an F-150 that's towing these vehicles. So when I think work, that's what my brain does, because I remember going to 2 auctions a day and towing cars, and the Cybertruck would not work for that right now.
Got it. So it's really comes down to how much time you can ensure that the truck is actively working, right? So if you minimize that to basically the same as a gas truck, then it becomes a much easier thing to do, right? It just becomes how much you're actually using the truck to actively work.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Brandon, for the answer and the question. All right, next question. And Boots Whitlock, Brandon, when are you getting a Model Y?
Yeah. So me and my wife have actually talked about, because I got out of that thing. I'm like,
ooh,
baby, this is fun. Yeah, but no time soon. I'm not going to the dark side yet. One thing I will say, this is personal deep dive real quick. We sold our house about 1.5 years ago. We've been renting ever since. Hate it, but we're waiting for the house market to come down so we can get a little bit better price on the house. But we're in a neighborhood, we're in suburbia hell, and I hate it. And we only have like 2 parking spots. So if I could have a Tesla to be my 3rd or 4th vehicle at my house, then I would be way more open to it. But it's not going to be my everyday driver. So keep working on me. And when we eventually buy our house with lots and lots of space and a detached garage or whatever, maybe it'll be a fun thing to have. But I had so much fun driving that Tesla that even if I don't care about the technology, if I think it doesn't work for my everyday use, I would buy one just to have the experience to actually hit the throttle. And that's what that was fun. Like I couldn't keep it under 80.
Which do you remember which trim John has? Does he have the performance or just a dual motor?
I don't think he had the performance.
Did it have a red line on their dual motor on the back in the badge? Did it have the red calipers? Do you remember?
Oh no, I didn't see red calipers. Yeah, so
okay, then it's not performance.
He had just a dual motor, I think.
Okay, so the performance, which is the one we have, is I think 1.2 seconds quicker to 60 than the one you drove. Yeah.
See, and I got a buddy. He told me I need to drive it now, but he's got a Plaid.
Oh, dude, you have to get in one. Yeah.
I don't
You have to do
know.
it.
I don't know how you keep it. How you don't. Like,
You put it on self-driving.
I would be scared. I would honestly be as quickly as the other one took off. I would be scared to experience anything. I mean, it'll be fun, but like just hitting it on the interstate, I would,
Yeah.
cause it's got to be such a smooth transition to higher speeds. I mean, it seems like you would be at 120 just like that and not even think about it.
Do you know the stats for the Plaid? You know it's 0 to 60 and quarter mile and stuff. Are you familiar with those numbers?
Isn't it like 1.8 or something like that?
1.9 to 60 and 8.9 quarter.
Whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
monster.
supercar. That's a supercar. That's what it is.
Yeah. Get in one and create some content. I think that would go really, really viral.
Yeah. Just need to borrow about 175 grand. How much are they? 145 grand.
100.
The Plaids are 100.
Yeah. Let's check it right now.
Yeah. I thought I looked one up.
It's an education thing we were talking about, right? It's like these are things that are like, people aren't as familiar with this stuff. Let me see. So Plaid.
Either way, the answer is no. So,
but we got to make sure. Yeah, 108.4.
Okay,
brand new.
But is that the base price though? That's no full self driving.
That's Plaid without the self driving.
Okay, because that's like I looked at it. Tell me how much adding full self driving is.
15.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can do $200 a month. You can also do a monthly subscription. You don't have to buy it up front.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what do most people do? Do they do the 15? It seems like it'd be better, honestly, to do the 200 a month, right?
Yeah. So it's a great question because that's a big thing in the Tesla community right now, where it's like you're asking a huge commitment up front. In the hopes that this thing actually becomes fully realized. Because the thought process becomes, if you pay $15,000 now to lock in your full self-driving, and then the car becomes self-driving in, say, the next couple of years, and you can add it to the fleet, and it just drives around and it picks up people on your behalf, and it basically becomes your own Uber, then the ROI, the return on investment on that $15,000 is like 5x, 6x over the course of the vehicle's life.
Right.
So that's the thought process behind that.
Yeah, but can you turn it off and turn it, like if you're going the $200 a month, can you turn it off and turn it on whenever you want to?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, and then if anyone is around your area, you're in Tennessee, right? You're somewhere around Tennessee?
I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina, that's right. If you're in North Carolina and you're in the comments and you want to let Brandon drive around the Plaid, let him know. Hit him up.
I have it open for a Plaid, so I'm
okay.
I might have to try it, but
I think you're just scared not to do it because then you're going to have to buy a Tesla.
No, honestly, I'm scared of the speed. Not as far as hurting myself or whatever, but I'm scared that like I just wouldn't realize it. So okay, take you a little behind the scenes. I'm a used car dealer, right? So if I get a ticket that's like 20 over or whatever, I don't know what the stipulations are, but I can lose my license just like that. So so that worries me a little, and I don't know that I'm going to have the self-control to be able to not punch it. So
got it. So you're just being a mature, responsible individual.
I just know that I'm not mature enough to be able to sit in that thing and not hit it. Yeah.
Fair enough. That's funny. All right, let's do the next question here. That's fantastic. Next question. And then time it right. There we go. Vasito. Question: should Tesla create a trailer for the semi with solar panels and a battery on the trailer? Yeah, we briefly talked about this a little earlier with the truck, where we can get a single bed or whatever, some sort of trailer that it can pull and it can reserve its range. But what's interesting about the semi is that a semi, the truck that the actual the semi truck that Tesla builds, that can do 80,000 pounds and get 500 miles of range. So it's like one of those things where depending how much more miles you need for the trips that the truck is used for, then the solar panel and the battery on the trailer might actually be detrimental because you're adding so much additional weight to the trailer. And if you're already doing enough range to cover 80% of trucking needs, then I don't know why that would be necessary. But how do you think about that equation, Brandon?
Yeah, I think you have to. If you're talking about towing capacity and the amount, if you want to get it to the point where it's going to appeal to everyone who wants to work in it. Now I know that there's going to be, there's select situations where you have to use the truck all day long. There's certain jobs where you have to do that. But if you want to appeal to that type of person that wants to beat the truck all day long, you're going to have this if you're only having a range of like 250 miles when you're towing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with like team trucks on the semis, I know team trucks with their trailers, you would need like a special use case, because with that one, you're just always on the road, and you got these like long haul truckers too that probably the existing semi wouldn't work for them. But yeah, to cover all the cases, it makes sense to do something like that. All right, let's do a couple more. Next question. And YouTuber POV question: any chance for Brandon's type of dealership get unsold EV and sell on MSRP? Do you understand that question?
No,
It's
word
worded a
that
little
in a
weird.
different way. Let's see.
Any
Hold up.
chance for Brandon's type of dealership to get unsold EV? So I think what he's asking is, would you be willing to sell EVs that are used that go unsold, or maybe if manufacturers like say GM has a Bolt they're trying to offload, would you sell them at your dealer? I think
So this person does not watch my channel. So the kind of customer that I sell to, what we believe in is we don't like debt, and we also try to help a consumer that's in the lower end of the economical sociology. What's that word? Anyway, the lower demographic as far as their wealth goes. If that's the best way to put it. But we sell cars that are like $5,000 and under. So we want to give a product, and it's hard to do, but we want to give a product to someone who doesn't want to take debt and wants to be able to buy a decent vehicle and not have to pay crazy amounts for. So that's the client base that we serve. So it's going to be a long time before EVs actually make it to where we can stay under that $5,000 range. And it's really our goal and our mission to be able to help this type of underserved community in the car market. So just to answer your question, no, there's not going to be any EVs that are $5,000 and under that are halfway decent in the foreseeable future. So that is not a route that we're going to be able to take. I would love for us to be able to do it, but the pricing is not going to work for that.
Makes sense. So you're open to it as long as there is a good car at that price that's an EV.
All right.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, this would bring up the next question, and then we'll do one more, and we'll let Brandon get on his way. Breakfast pizza question: best kind of pizza. What are Brandon's thoughts about the potential lack of auto mechanics for ICE vehicles as the older generation retires and younger potential mechanics work in EVs or other industries? That's a phenomenal question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We're seeing that a lot happen now. So a lot of these, I mean, guys my age and even people that are younger than me, you're seeing this across a lot of professions that are like like labor intensive positions. You're seeing a massive exodus in this, and they're going more towards the technological side, which is good because it's moving us forward as a society. But you still got to have wrench turners, and we're just not seeing a lot of them now. And it's not because the ICE vehicles are dying or whatever. It's just because there's a lack of interest really in having these tougher jobs. Mechanics, I mean, that's a very, very tough job. And you can go out and have a profession that's, I mean, that makes about the same amount of money, and it's a lot easier job. So when you're going to a lot of these mechanic shops that are actually thriving, it's because it's all like family owned businesses, and they have generations and generations that are staying in this. So what I think you're going to start seeing is, as we have a lot fewer mechanics to repair your cars, it's going to cost a lot more money because these techs are going to be able to make more money. And I feel like that's no different than probably plumbers, electricians, any kind of hands-on labor is going to continue to just get more and more expensive because, I mean, what I look at it, yeah, my generation and the younger generation, they're lazy, man. They don't want to do this stuff. They want to sit at a desk.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think especially if there is a transition away from ICE cars to EVs over time, I think a auto mechanic is going to be one of the best professions for the next 20, 30 years, because you're going to have less people working on them, but then you're going to have this giant fleet of gas cars that still are going to be on the road as people wait to transition to the EV, especially if we get to a point, in my opinion, if we get to the point where gas cars become obsolete, but we don't have nearly enough supply of EVs to turn over the fleet quick enough, then you're going to have a huge amount of gas cars that need to be repaired for longer because people are just sitting and waiting instead of putting money in something that's obsolete, that's new. They're going to wait for that EV. And so being a mechanic in that world seems like a phenomenal job, like
So
a super secure job.
I hear this all the time, and just hearing you say that, I'm curious your thoughts on this. How long do you think we are from 51+% of the vehicles on the road in the US being EVs?
On the road or new cars sold?
No, on the road.
It's a long time,
No,
right?
yeah. Okay, take it back. Take it back. New car sold. Yeah, let's do that.
I think 51% of new cars sold in the US as EVs will be, so the car market around is about what, 14 million a year, new cars ish, just in the US. 2028.
Wow, that's a lot earlier than I think, but
yeah. When
that's
do you think?
I think it's going to be way longer than we can. Whatever number I would put on it, it would still be even longer than that. I think it's going to take forever, just because the adoption of, unless Tesla does something crazy, unless it just makes it, unless it's just so cheap to actually produce these EVs at some point where it just makes sense. And I mean, at that point, if you're getting more, I think the more EVs you get on the road, the actual more demand is going to be for them, because it's going to actually push the price of gas up so high. Because I mean, if you have less people using gas, it's going to be less profitable for these drillers to go into the earth and get this fuel, and it's going to just continuously push up the price of gas to where it's just unaffordable for the average person to even have a gas car at any point. So, yeah. I see it coming, but I think it's going to be a landslide when it actually happens. But I think we're really, really far away from it, just because of infrastructure too.
No, I definitely see your points, but the reason why I say 2028 is because if you look at, I think the U.S. brand, what is it, like 10%? So EV new cars U.S. percent of total. I think it's something like 6%. It's less than I thought. It's about 6%. But the two giant variables that are happening in the next 5 years is that Tesla is going to get up to, their goal is 20 million cars per year by 2030. So, a significant percentage of that is going to go to the United States, probably about half. They have that Mexico plant that's going to start operating in the next couple of years. That's going to be shipping their compact car. And they're probably going to expand Austin to do another million or two in addition to that. And so they're going to do about 1 million cars in the US-ish this year. And so for them to get to, say, 25 to 30% of the market in the US, they would need to get to about 6 million in the US. And then the rest of the automakers, I'm hoping, catch up and they start selling against that as well. And that gets you to about 50% by 2029.
Well, if you're using numbers now, so all these auto manufacturers are way behind on the amount of production they want to get out, right? Like Toyota, Honda.
I think the Chinese will come in.
Yeah, so that the actual ICE numbers, they're going to also be increasing too, because they're going to get production out. So that's something to factor into.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's going to be wild. Whatever that timeline is, it's going to be wild. But I think the fleet itself is going to take way longer because the fleet is giant. So 51% of all cars on the road in the US to be EVs, probably 2038, something like that. It's going to take a little bit longer because it takes time. So, all right, let's do one more. Last question. And Donald, big friend of the show. Thank you, Donald. Also one of the great mods that we have. Brandon, do you see dealerships being gobbled up by larger dealerships, or will they mostly all go bankrupt or bought out by Tesla? How do you view the dealership thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because you see this with other retail. I mean, like Walmart gobbled up all the small, not gobbled up, but took over the general store type of business. And a lot of people ask about that for big dealerships like these Carvanas, these CarMaxes versus little used car dealerships or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen, mainly because there are lots of cars that are still being bought and sold every day that these bigger dealerships, they don't want to deal with. Like the stuff that I buy and sell, there's not enough margin, and there's a lot of problems that we have to do. I have a mechanic on staff, And there's a lot of time that he puts into these cars that would not be profitable for a much larger dealership, because they have to make $2,500, $3,500 a car a lot of times before they're even like breaking even. And we can go in here and we can buy these cars and we can make $1,200, $1,500 on a car and do very, very well because our expenses are down. We have a small team. I have a mechanic on staff, and there's just not going to be a lot of big dealers that want to deal with the kind of things that we have to deal with these cars. When you're looking at that, say, well, they might just do away with these cars or whatever. But then you have, let's say, all the small used car dealers just go away. Then what's going to happen is you're going to have people selling these cheaper vehicles on the open market, just individual to individual. And when you have people doing that, you're always going to have a third party step in and say, oh, I can make some money here. So even if all of the small used car dealers are just abolished in one day, then you would have other dealers, brokers, whatever you want to call the new segment of whatever the buying and selling of cars. You're going to have them come in and do the exact same thing that we're doing, because these big dealerships are just not going to deal with the really, really cheap cars. They can't make money on them.
Gotcha. So it's basically just going to keep the whole same thing's going to keep going until the end of time.
The other, because I look at I get a lot of questions about, well, what if all these OEMs go to direct consumer? That's not going to happen because the legalities behind it, it's not going to allow it to happen. But let's for this conversation, let's say all the OEMs go direct to consumer, and consumer goes in and buys. Well, now they're going to have these cars, and they either trade them in, and then what's going to happen with these cars that these OEMs don't want? Then they're going to send them to auction, and then you send them to me. Let's say the OEMs just say, you know what, we're not taking trade-ins. Then you get the other scenario where, okay, these there's going to be companies pop up that, and you're already seeing it now, like We Buy Any Car, these places that pop up on the internet that will buy your car, and then they'll send it to auction, because there are just so many of these sub $10,000 cars that these big companies don't want. So they got to dump them somewhere, and that's where we come in.
I see. Okay. That's super helpful. All right. Well, we're about an hour and a half in. Brandon, I want to give you, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. I always love talking with you and getting a lot of your insights. If you haven't watched Brandon's channel yet, Car Questions Answered on YouTube, he has been killing it. He is phenomenal. He's got his plaque right there too. Congratulations on 100,000 subs, brother. You more than deserve it.
Very much.
Friggin' awesome. Make sure you go find him. We'll have links for his channel in the comment section, in the description below as well. Car Questions Answered, right on YouTube. Not on social media though, because he's smart.
Staying away from it. Staying away from it.
Well, you definitely find him on YouTube. So any parting words for the masses, Brandon?
Yeah, just thank you for letting me come on. I was telling Farzad before we jumped on this. This is the most fun thing that I do on YouTube. I enjoy the making videos and putting them out there and getting all the response and all the comments and everything, but being able to interact with you guys, being able to interact with Farzad and his wife, making new friends. This is what I really enjoy about this job, if you want to call it a job. I mean, it's still so fun that I don't know if I can even call it a job. It's a lot of work, but it's not something that I hate yet. So we're not going to call it a job yet, but this is the most fun thing I do. And I really appreciate you guys letting me come on your channel.
Of course, man. It's my pleasure. Like I said, welcome back anytime. We'll look to do these as often as we can. I really do think as the rest of the year sort of evolves and the car market takes twists and turns, I think Brandon's going to be an amazing resource. So make sure you stick with his channel, Car Questions Answered, to get a bunch of your insights. And thank you to everybody watching us today. Thank you so much for subscribing and liking and all that good stuff. To the usual crowd that's always here, thank you all so much for your support. Mods, as always, thank you so much for the incredible work that you do in the comment section, keeping the conversation awesome and civil and super productive. And last but not least, producer wife, thank you so much for the incredible work you always do. There you go. Round of applause for yourself. And we'll see you on the next one, everybody. Thank you so much. Take it easy.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.